The grit under my fingernails felt like sand in my soul. 78 years old, and I was on my knees, scrubbing the entrance hall tiles. Mother, are you even trying? Clara's voice cut through the house. It was sharp, perfectly pitched to draw attention, but too cold to be kind. You missed a spot near the rhododendron planter. Use more bleach. I didn't answer. My back screamed the objection that my lips could no longer form. The whole house was vibrating with frantic, self-important energy. Tonight was Clara's biggest event of the year. A networking party. She called it a strategic social gathering. I called it proof that my daughter cared more about her potential next client than about her actual mother. Clara had moved back in 3 years ago. She said she was saving up for her own place. She promised she would help maintain the home, that we would share expenses. Instead, she took over. This wasn't my house anymore. It was her venue. I focused on the grout line. White, cold, unforgiving. I rubbed until my arthritis fled, imagining the pain was scrubbing away the last traces of my own identity. This house was my history. My late husband, Robert, built the pergola in the backyard. My children took their first steps on these oak floors. This house held decades of quiet Sundays, loud Christmases, and the scent of lemon polish. Now, it smelled only of Clara's expensive perfumes and the faint, bitter scent of obligation. I heard the front door open and the brisk click of her assistant, Sarah, entering. Sarah was young, efficient, and never looked me in the eye. To Sarah, I was furniture, an old dusty accessory to Clara's ambitious life. "The caterers are here, Clara," Sarah announced. Clara swept past me, her silk robe trailing. She didn't pause to see if I needed help rising. She simply stepped around my kneeling body, as if navigating a minor obstacle. "Mother, don't track water back into the living room," she commanded over her shoulder. "And hurry up. The lighting fixtures need dusting before they arrive." I finally pushed myself up slowly, using the sturdy old hall table for balance. The table Robert and I bought on our first anniversary. Clara used it to dump her junk mail. It had been 4 days of this, since Clara decided the house wasn't merely presentable, but needed to be spectacularly spotless for her guests. I hadn't slept more than 5 hours a night, trying to meet her endless demands. The patio furniture, the silver polish, the guest bathroom, where I had to scrub away the mold Clara neglected for months. Yesterday, she found me sitting down for 10 minutes, drinking a glass of water. "Honestly, Mother," she sighed, rolling her eyes like I was a teenager caught smoking. "You just sit around. There is so much to do. Get up and clean this mess." That was the turning point. Not the exhaustion, not the pain, but the utter contempt in her voice. "Clean this mess. My mess. My life." I went into the kitchen. My kitchen. It used to be full of warm smells, baking bread, simmering stew. Now it was a sterile operations center. Stainless steel gleamed, reflecting my tired face. The caterers were taking over the island. They moved with a professional indifference that mirrored Clara's own. They set up chafing dishes and polished glassware, treating me like a ghost in my own home. I went to the drawer where I kept the house keys, the original keys. I needed them. I had spent months making phone calls, quiet calls, when Clara was at work or when she went away for her weekend spa treatments. I spoke to lawyers, real estate agents, and finally, I spoke to Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison lived 2 doors down. He was a kind man, a retired contractor who had seen the whole neighborhood change. He also knew the market, and he knew Clara. He had often seen me sitting on the porch, waiting for Robert's ghost, looking drawn. He'd bring me his homegrown tomatoes sometimes. He understood quiet desperation. The agreement we signed was airtight. It was irrevocable. It was unfair to Clara, perhaps, But life had already been unfair to me. I gripped the keys in my pocket. They felt heavy, cold, and solid, the last shred of my control. Clara walked in, looking magnificent in a fitted black dress. She looked expensive and perfectly groomed. She carried a garment bag, tossing it carelessly onto a dining chair. "Mother, did you find your outfit?" she asked, not looking at me, but checking her reflection in the dark oven door. "My outfit?" "Yes, the black shift dress I bought you 3 years ago. The one you wear for funerals." She finally turned, inspecting me with a critical gaze. "I need you to blend into the woodwork tonight. I don't want people asking questions about who the elderly woman is." I had imagined wearing my navy silk dress, the one Robert loved. I had secretly hoped to sit in the corner of the conservatory, listening to the music, feeling like the matriarch of the home. I was the matron of the utility closet. "The black dress is upstairs, Clara," I said, my voice steady, the steady voice that came from decades of swallowing pain. "Good. And make sure you keep the noise down when you leave. You can retreat to the guest bedroom now. I don't want you wandering the halls once the guests arrive. It's unprofessional." Unprofessional. I was her mother. I felt a quiet, powerful rage settle in my chest, a cold weight that finally balanced out years of lightweight sadness. She was going to entertain her friends, pretend she lived in this beautiful, spotless museum, all on the unpaid labor of the woman who birthed her. She planned to bask in the credit for the house I had protected, maintained, and paid for long after Robert passed, and she planned to lock me away until the pretense was over. "Before I go change," I said, my voice smooth, "there's one last detail." Clara frowned, clearly annoyed I was interrupting her final checks. "What is it, Mother? We have 20 minutes. I walked toward the large French doors, leading to the newly cleaned patio. Clara watched me, suspicious. "The deed," I said simply. "The deed? Why are you talking about that old paperwork?" She waved her hand dismissively. "We settled this years ago. When Robert died, the house was placed in my name for ease of inheritance. It's all legally handled. Don't worry your head about it." She had lied. Or at least, she had misled me. I had signed documents assuming it was a trust arrangement protecting my rights. It was a transfer of ownership that stripped me naked of my security. I only understood the full scope when I sought external counsel months ago. "No, Clara," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "It wasn't settled. Not until today." Clara laughed, a strained, nervous sound. "Oh, Mother, stop being dramatic. The only thing you need to worry about is whether the black dress still fits you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crisp, thick envelope. It wasn't the deed itself, but a letter, sealed and official, signed by the title company and witnessed by Mr. Harrison's lawyer. "I have done everything you asked, Clara. The floors are clean, the silver shines. The house is immaculate for your strategic gathering." I held the envelope out. "My last duty as your housekeeper." Clara paused, genuinely curious now, which was rare. She reluctantly took the envelope. "What is this? A late birthday card?" she scoffed. "It's a notification," I said, watching her face as she opened it. The light in the kitchen seemed to dim as her eyes scanned the formal letterhead and the bold capitalized paragraph. She had perfected her mask over the years, but now the mask cracked. Confusion twisted into disbelief, then cold, absolute terror. Her hand trembled, letting the envelope fall to the floor. "No, no, Eleanor, you didn't." Her voice was a ragged whisper. I looked at the house one last time. The gleaming surfaces, the pristine order, the monument to her vanity. "I did," I confirmed. "I sold the house last week. Full, immediate possession." "Who? Who would buy it this fast? This is madness. I live here." She was practically shouting now. the sound muted by the impending start of the party. Mr. Harrison, 2 doors down. He's closing tonight. The money is already in a secured account under my name, and he understood my condition. The sale was contingent on immediate occupancy for the new owner. Clara's face was white. The perfect makeup looked like war paint. "You cleaned his mess, Clara," I whispered, turning toward the staircase. "I merely prepared the property for the new occupant." "You can't do this. I'll call my lawyer. We'll fight this in court. I'll get an injunction. You signed documents years ago." "You took the house, Clara," I interrupted gently, moving past her. "But you forgot to take the mother who owned the house. And mothers, when they are discarded, sometimes decide to change the rules of the game." I started up the stairs, my old knees complaining with every step, but my heart feeling lighter than it had in decades. I could hear the first ring of the doorbell downstairs. The guests were starting to arrive. Clara screamed, not in pain, but in sheer panic and fury. "Mother, get back here! They're arriving! Where are you going?" "To the guest room, just like you asked," I replied without looking back. I wouldn't want to be unprofessional. I walked down the hall to the small unused bedroom. It had no view and smelled faintly of mothballs. It was the room she relegated me to whenever she had guests she wanted to impress. I opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it quietly. I waited. I didn't need to see the chaos downstairs. I could hear the muffled rising tide of Clara's frantic, desperate arguments. She was trying to greet her guests while simultaneously trying to understand how she had lost everything. I heard the murmur of confused guests, then the heavy, serious tone of a new voice downstairs. Mr. Harrison. He was punctual. I sat on the narrow bed, the old house trembling around me with the unexpected commotion. I pulled the keys from my pocket. They were the original set, the ones I had copied before selling the property. In my hand, I held the spare set Mr. Harrison had given me before closing the deal, the key to the side utility door, and the new key for the front lock. I had planned my escape route. I just needed the exact right moment. The moment when Clara realized not only that she was homeless, but that the woman she discarded was the one who engineered her spectacular fall. The screaming downstairs stopped abruptly. The heavy silence that replaced it was worse. I knew what that silence meant. Mr. Harrison was a man of action. He hadn't come to argue. He had come to possess his property. My own heart thumped against my ribs, waiting for the sound that would signal the end of my life as Clara's servant. Then I heard it. The clear, mechanical clank from the front door. The sound of a new reinforced deadbolt being engaged. Clara was locked out of the party she spent 4 days cleaning for. I heard her panicked sprint up the stairs. The knob of the guest room door rattled violently. I had locked it from the inside. "Open the door, Mother. Open this door right now. This isn't funny." Her voice was laced with pure venom. I remained silent. I stood up, walked to the window, and opened the latch. The window overlooked the quiet, overgrown garden. I had a small bag packed, a wallet, a few clothes, Robert's favorite watch, and the secure bank card to my new account. I had chosen justice over comfort. Now, I just had to step out and embrace the cold air of freedom. The shouting outside the door reached a fever pitch, demanding entry. I looked down at the short drop to the damp grass. It was only 6 feet. I could manage. The new keys felt warm in my palm. My new life was waiting, just on the other side of this window. But first, I needed to know exactly what Clara would do next. And more importantly, I needed her to know I was watching. I paused, resting my hand on the sill, listening to the desperate rattling of the doorknob. How long until she realizes that this wasn't just about the house, but about the inheritance she had stolen from me, piece by piece? The party was over, But the reckoning was just beginning. I took a deep, steadying breath. My knees cracked, loud enough that I thought Clara might hear it from the living room. She didn't. She was too busy on the phone, coordinating the catering delivery. I pressed the stiff bristles deep into the kitchen grout. The white tiles hadn't been this bright since we first moved in, 40 years ago. Mother, are you sure that corner is clean? Clara's voice cut through the silence, sudden and sharp. She hadn't even looked away from her phone. She simply knew where I was and what I was doing, and felt the need to supervise. I swallowed the bitterness, along with the dust I was kicking up. "It's clean, dear," I murmured, my voice strained from bending so long. "No, not clean. Spotless. Remember, this party is for the mayor's chief of staff. We need to project impeccable standards." We. There was no we. There was only her projection and my labor. I was her servant, not her hostess. I was the hired help she didn't have to pay, housed in the basement like a forgotten possession. I wiped my brow with the back of a damp gloved hand. The ache in my back was a familiar friend now, joining the fear that used to live in my chest. That fear, at least, had started to recede. It had taken 3 years of this treatment for me to realize the difference between respecting my daughter's choices and surviving her demands. It took her telling me I was lucky to have a roof over my head, even if that roof felt like a cage. The house, this beautiful big house my late husband Richard and I built together, had become Clara's instrument of control. She didn't want me here. She just wanted the property secured until she was ready to sell. But Richard had been smarter than she realized. He had left the legal arrangement messy, specifically to protect me. He had left me the life tenancy rights. She owned the structure, but I owned the right to live here until I decided otherwise. This simple, powerful legal fact was the key to my freedom and the key to her downfall. I finished the kitchen floor. It gleamed, reflecting the harsh midday light. I rose slowly, leaning on the sink for balance. Next was the dining room, the room where she planned to impress her high-profile guest tonight. Clara appeared in the doorway, frowning. "Mother, the silver needs polishing too. The antique tea set, the one grandmother brought from Ireland." I looked at the heavy tarnished box. Clara never used that set. It was heavy, delicate, and required hours of tedious, meticulous work. She simply wanted to demonstrate she owned valuable things. "I was planning to get to that after lunch, Clara." She tapped her fingernails impatiently against the polished granite counter. "No, now. The caterers arrive at 3. I need that entire space pristine and ready for setting up, and I need you out of the way before the florists arrive." Out of the way. The defining instruction of my late life. I knew, deep down, that she was forcing this extreme labor not just for cleanliness, but for control. She wanted me exhausted and subservient when the guests arrived. She wanted me to understand, one last time, that this house was hers. The silver rag was rough in my hand. I squeezed it, picturing the transaction I had finalized just 3 weeks earlier. Mr. Peterson, our neighbor, who lived across the fence in the small tidy bungalow. He was a quiet man, a widower, a retired lawyer who enjoyed gardening. He had watched Clara's transition of power in our family with quiet disapproval. I had approached him discreetly, weeks after Clara had insisted I could no longer entertain my knitting group in the living room because it smelled like old people and yarn. I had explained my situation, the life tenancy, the humiliation, the deep paralyzing desire to simply have peace and dignity for my final years. He listened, nodding slowly over a cup of herbal tea. He understood property law better than anyone. "It is a complex right, Martha," he had said, looking at the faded wallpaper in the small breakfast nook. "You essentially hold the key to the house's utility. If you leave, Clara inherits the structure free and clear. If you stay, she cannot profit from it. I remember telling him, clearly and without emotion, I want to leave, Mr. Peterson, but I want the leaving to hurt her as much as she has hurt me. I needed to sell that key, not to Clara, who would have offered me pennies and a nursing home pamphlet, but to someone who valued the strategic opportunity. Mr. Peterson didn't need the house, but he needed the land. His children were urging him to move, but he loved his garden and the quiet neighborhood. We struck a deal based on my life tenancy value. A substantial sum, paid up front, enough for a small, simple flat far away, a place where I could breathe the air I wanted to breathe. But the most crucial clause in the agreement was the timing. The transaction was a real estate anomaly, leveraging the life estate. The final payment transfer was set for 6:59 p.m. today, the exact moment the right of possession would transfer from me to him. And Mr. Peterson, the quiet gardener, had specified that he would exercise his new right immediately. Was tired of Clara's loud parties too. I polished the last spoon, my reflection staring back at me, distorted and stretched. My face looked thinner than it should, but the eyes held a strange, new light, a predatory patience. Clara walked back in. She had changed into a tailored silk blouse. She was inspecting her nails. The dining room is adequate. Now, the main challenge. I waited. The study. It's cluttered, Mother. Those books, those old papers. It looks like a dusty tomb. We need that room for coats and overflow seating. Empty it completely. I want every single personal item packed and removed by 4 o'clock. The study. My husband Richard's study. The one place in this sprawling house that remained untouched by Clara's relentless organizational schemes. It was my sanctuary, where I did my quiet reading and writing. This was the final, calculated erasure of my presence here. Clara, those are my papers. Richard's old business records are in there. They are junk, Mother. You don't need 50-year-old tax returns. Toss them. I need the space. If you don't empty it, I will have Mario haul everything to the curb tomorrow. Mario was her strong, silent groundskeeper. My heart twisted, a cold, painful knot. She knew how much that room meant to me. She was intentionally stepping on the last ember of my self-respect. Very well, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. I will clean out the study. I didn't toss the papers. I didn't toss Richard's old maps or the small ceramic bird I bought him on our honeymoon. I packed them, carefully, lovingly, into a single, sturdy cardboard box, placing the few things I truly cherished. The box was small. I realized, watching it fill up, how little I actually needed to survive happily. I left the big heavy oak desk. I left the enormous leather chairs that she wanted for her courtroom. I left the valuable old globe, all the heavy burdensome possessions that she prized. Let her fight for those. I looked at the clock on the mantelpiece. 4:30 p.m. The house was perfect, impeccable. The air smelled of fresh lemon polish and anxiety. I had finished the job of the perfect, subservient mother, the maid who provided the backdrop for her important social climbing. The florists arrived, then the servers, adjusting their black vests. Clara was running through the house, issuing clipped orders, her smile fixed and terrifyingly bright. She hadn't looked at me once since I confirmed the study was clear. I was already invisible. I slipped down to the basement apartment, the small, cold concrete box she called my suite. I sat on the edge of the twin bed I hated, listening to the muffled sounds of the rising excitement upstairs, the clinking of glasses, the sound of ice being dumped into buckets, the music starting, soft jazz, building the atmosphere. It was 6:00 p.m. 60 minutes remained until the transfer. The guests would be arriving shortly. The mayors, staff, the rich investors, all the people Clara worked so hard to impress. They would be admiring the sparkling floors, the polished silver, the immaculate surfaces, all bought with the last of my dignity. I reached under the loose floorboard beneath my dresser. My hand closed around the heavy brass key. Not the daily use copy I was allowed, but the original master key, the one Richard gave me 30 years ago. That key was the proof of ownership, the key to the life tenancy right I had successfully sold. I held it tightly, feeling the cool, solid metal. It felt heavier now than the entire house. I changed into my best navy dress, the one I hadn't worn since Richard's funeral. I combed my hair and put on the small pearl necklace my own mother gave me. I did not look like a cleaning lady. I looked like a quiet, respectable woman preparing to attend a wake. I waited for the first official chime of the doorbell, the sound of the party starting. 6:45 p.m. I knew the moment Mr. Peterson would be making his move. He was a man of precision and absolute integrity. The terms of the contract were clear. Immediate possession, exercised at 7:02 p.m. I left the basement. I didn't need to sneak. Clara was too absorbed in greeting her first wave of important guests. I walked up the main stairs, the grand staircase Richard had always insisted we needed. I could hear Clara's high, charming laughter emanating from the foyer. I had three things with me: the small cardboard box of memories, my purse containing the documentation, and the heavy brass master key tucked deep inside. I reached the top of the stairs and stopped. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the scent of catered canapes. I looked down the hall, toward the glittering, happy chaos of the entryway. Clara was accepting a magnum of champagne from a distinguished-looking man in a tailored suit. Her face was flushed with success. She had achieved her perfect party. She had achieved her impeccable standard. And now I was ready to serve the final course, the truth. I had 5 minutes until the house became legally, irrevocably Mr. Peterson's, and Clara had no idea I was watching her, or that the man who now held the deeds to this house was standing right outside the garden gate, waiting for the clock to strike 7. I needed to make my way to the front door, unnoticed. I needed to be there when the locks changed, because I knew, with chilling certainty, that when the moment came, Clara would finally see me, and I needed to be the last thing she saw before the music stopped. The pen felt cold in my hand. It was the same Mont Blanc pen my husband had given me on our 25th wedding anniversary. I used that pen to sign away the house he had built for me. Mr. Peterson sat across the kitchen table. The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty window panes, illuminating the stack of documents. We didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been discussed in hushed tones over the last week. He knew what this meant to me. He respected the silence. He only offered a small, sad smile as I pushed the final document across the table. "It's done, Edith," he said, his voice low. "The transfer of title is immediate upon execution of these papers." Immediate. I liked that word. He confirmed the details one last time, checking his watch. The agreement stated he would take possession at 8 p.m. sharp tonight, regardless of who was inside. "I prefer a clean break, Mr. Peterson," I told him. "No drama, just quiet justice." He nodded. He understood that my dignity was worth more than the confrontation. After he left, I stood in the exact center of the living room, the papers safely tucked away. The house was no longer mine. It had been sold for a fraction of its market value, yes, but the price was not important. The immediate timing was everything. I felt a dizzying mix of panic and utter peace. This house held 50 years of life, children's height marks on the pantry door, the stain on the fireplace hearth from Christmas 1998 when the tree fell over. My wedding photo, faded and slightly warped, still sat on the mantel. I walked the perimeter, not weeping, but examining, saying goodbye to the memory of what this place had once been: a home, a sanctuary. Now, it was just four walls filled with obligations I was finally shedding. The weight of the transaction was heavy, but the relief was 1,000 times greater. I had done it. I had secured my future, and I had ensured that Sarah could not use this place or me anymore. The chime of the front door broke my introspection. It was Sarah. She came in like a gale force wind, clutching 3 shopping bags and shouting before she'd even closed the door. Mother, you haven't even started on the guest bathroom, have you? It needs to be spotless. Veronica is obsessive about cleanliness. I was wiping down the kitchen counter I had just cleaned an hour before, trying to remove a speck of dust only Sarah could see. I'm finishing the kitchen now, dear, I replied, my voice steady, perhaps too steady. She didn't even look at me. She dumped her bags near the staircase, new dresses for her grand entrance. The guest list ballooned again. 40 people. This place needs to look like a showroom, not a museum, she snapped, walking into the living room. She ran her finger across the top of the antique china cabinet, my grandmother's cabinet. Dust here. Look at this, Mother. Are you even trying? I looked at the imaginary dust she was pointing at. I realized then that it didn't matter how perfectly I cleaned. She wasn't seeing the dirt, she was seeing the opportunity to exercise control. I picked up the feather duster. It felt ridiculous. The cleaning woman. The elder forced into servitude for a party she wasn't truly invited to, in a house she no longer owned. For the next 2 hours, methodically cleaned every corner Sarah pointed to. I scrubbed the grout in the bathroom floor, the pain in my lower back screaming. I polished the heavy silver serving trays she insisted on using, trays that had been tarnished for 5 years because we never entertained this formally. She stood over me most of the time, barking instructions. The mudroom floor is filthy, Mother. Don't let anyone see that. It's embarrassing. The mudroom. That was the room she used exclusively for storing her expensive cycling gear. I was never allowed in there unless I was bringing in groceries. It felt like walking onto foreign soil. I grabbed the mop and scrubbed the expensive stone tiles, feeling the familiar burn in my shoulders. While I worked, Sarah was on the phone, laughing loudly with her friend. Oh, darling, yes, it's going to be fabulous. Honestly, the house is massive, perfect for entertaining. Mom has kept it in decent shape, but honestly, we'll need to knock out that ugly sunroom eventually. It just screams 1970s. The sunroom was where my husband and I had our breakfast every morning for 20 years, where he read the paper and where I watched the birds. I dipped the mop into the dirty water. My knuckles were raw. Knock out the sunroom. The anger didn't rise in a flare of heat, but in a cold, hard knot of certainty. I was doing the right thing. Every insult, every command, every mention of tearing down my memories, it was fuel. Around 5 p.m., the catering staff arrived. They were efficient, young, and professional. Sarah immediately redirected her focus from me to them. She treated them with flawless politeness, the kind of charm she reserved only for those whose services she paid for. To them, she was the gracious host, the owner of the grand estate. To me, she was still yelling across the noise of the oven fans. Mother, go set the folding chairs out on the patio, please, and check that my wine glasses are all spotless. They were dusty in the cabinet. I retrieved the chairs from the garage. They were heavy, stored high on a shelf. I dragged them, one by one, out to the garden. The physical exertion was difficult, but the mental clarity it brought was surprising. This was the last time I would strain my body for her vanity. When I finally returned inside, Sarah was directing where the floral arrangements should go. Mother, why don't you go shower now? She said, finally noticing my sweat and grime. You've earned a rest. You can watch TV in the study until the party starts. Then you should probably stay upstairs. It will be crowded and you'll just be underfoot. Underfoot. Yes, dear, I replied, managing a slight, thin smile that felt like silk. I believe I will. I climbed the wide staircase slowly, each step a step toward freedom. I didn't go to the bathroom Sarah reserved for me. I went straight to my bedroom, the master suite that I had decided to keep locked since my husband passed away, choosing instead the small, comfortable guest room facing the garden. I opened the door to the master suite. It still smelled faintly of his aftershave and lavender. I walked to the cedar chest. Inside, hidden beneath a shawl, was the small, worn travel bag I had packed 2 days ago. It contained one change of clothes, my small photos album, my essential medications, my bank card, and the new set of keys to the apartment I had already secured. Most importantly, it held the official copies of the documents I had signed earlier today. I changed out of my cleaning clothes. I put on the dark navy dress I liked, simple and dignified. I smoothed my hair. I checked my reflection. I looked calm, resolved. I tucked the small bag into the back of the walk-in closet, ready for immediate retrieval. I sat on the bed and waited. The clock read 7:15 p.m. Downstairs the noise began to rise. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft peals of music. The first round of guests was arriving. Sarah's grand night had begun. I walked to the front window, peering through the slight gap in the curtains. I could see the driveway filling up with expensive cars. Sarah was standing on the porch, basking in the attention, receiving compliments on her impeccable timing and stunning home. Then I shifted my gaze across the wide lawn, past the hedges. I looked at Mr. Peterson's house. His windows were dark, quiet. He was waiting, just like me. I checked my watch again. 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes. I walked quietly out of the bedroom and started down the stairs. The music was louder now, the laughter booming. I saw Sarah talking animatedly to a woman in a dazzling dress. I stopped halfway down, near the grandfather clock. Sarah glanced up. She saw me. The polite mask she wore for her friends slipped, replaced by an expression of irritation. "Mother, what are you doing down here? Go upstairs. The caterers are working. You'll be in the way." "I'm just getting a glass of water, dear," I said softly. "Well, be fast, and don't talk to anyone. I don't want you boring Mrs. Hawthorne with your garden stories." I nodded slowly. "Understood." I continued down the stairs, but instead of turning towards the kitchen sink, I walked straight to the front door, slipping past the busy caterers. I paused just inside the entrance hall, near the coat rack. I could hear Sarah telling Mrs. Hawthorne, loud enough for me to hear, "This house is just exhausting to maintain, but it's worth it. Maybe one day we can finally update the whole thing." I reached up to the coat rack and retrieved my keys. Not the house keys, the car keys. I opened the front door just a crack. No one noticed. They were all focused on Sarah and the expensive canapes being passed around. I slipped out into the cooling evening air. The time was 7:55 p.m. I didn't look back at the house or the party or the woman who was still screaming, "Mother!" because she had just realized I was gone. I didn't turn round when I heard the heavy, deliberate sound of a moving van pulling up the street, its massive shape blocking the light. I walked straight across the lawn and onto the street. I kept my head high, my pace steady. I rounded the corner of the hedge, and there he was, standing by the curb, holding a large, industrial-looking keyring. Mr. Peterson. Exactly on time. He didn't greet me. He just looked at me, his face etched with concern and resolution. "Are you ready, Edith?" he asked. I looked back at the house, bathed in the expensive celebratory glow of the party lights. I heard Sarah's voice, sharper now, panicked. I felt a slight shiver, but not of cold, of anticipation. "Yes, Mr. Peterson," I whispered. "It is exactly 8 o'clock. Let's finish this." I sat on the hard wooden chair. It was the only spot in the house Clara had not commanded me to clean today. I felt the cold plastic card tucked into my pocket. The bank account now held a different weight, a number I had never imagined seeing. It was strange. The immense fatigue in my bones felt exactly the same as always. The exhaustion of scrubbing floors and polishing glass. But beneath the tiredness, a small flame began to burn. It was satisfaction, a quiet, deep, chilling heat. Clara rushed past the study doorway, her phone glued to her ear. She was wearing a gown that must have cost more than my annual food budget. She paused abruptly when she saw me sitting there. I wasn't moving. I wasn't hovering. I was just sitting. Mother, are you just relaxing? Her voice was shrill, laced with that toxic blend of fake sweetness and real contempt she reserved for me. I looked at her. Her face was already flushed with the stress of hosting. She looked exactly like her father had when he was trying to bully a service agent on the phone, entitled and furious. "The house is immaculate, Clara," I replied, my voice steady. It had been years since I spoke to her, without a tremor of fear or anxiety. "I know it is. I told you I needed perfection. Now the flowers need to be placed on the buffet table. The florist was useless. Don't touch the centerpiece, just the small arrangements. And mother, honestly, your clothes. You're not dressed to receive guests. Go change into something less drab, or just stay out of sight." She didn't wait for my answer. She just spun away, checking her reflection in the gilded mirror she had inherited from her grandmother, my mother. The mirror I used to polish weekly, long before Clara owned it. She called out over her shoulder, "And while you're out of sight, check the recycling bins. I saw the caterers put glass in the paper bin. Fix it, right now." That was it, the final command, the last straw in a lifetime of misplaced chores. Sorting garbage for a party that was never meant for me. I stood up slowly. I did not move toward the bins. I walked into the hallway, where Clara was attempting to adjust a light fixture. "Clara?" She sighed heavily, not looking down. "What is it, Mother?" "I'm timing the lighting. Don't touch anything. I need to tell you something important. It won't wait until after your party." She dropped her hand from the light switch and finally looked at me. Impatience radiated off her like cheap cologne. "Be quick. The first important guests, the senator's aide, will be here in 20 minutes. I have sold the property rights to this house." The silence that followed was so complete, it was painful. The soundproofing in the walls seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Clara just stared. She blinked once, twice. Her perfect manicured jaw went slack. "What did you say?" she whispered. Her voice was too soft, too confused. It didn't sound like her at all. "I sold the property rights. The deed was executed this afternoon, 3 hours ago, to be precise." You sold my house? You can't. This is my house. You signed it over to me years ago. You put it in my name," she shrieked, instantly abandoning all pretenses of composure. A slight cold smile touched my lips. "No, Clara. I transferred the title, yes, but I retain the right of habitation, the use of the property, the life estate, the right to live here until my death. We discussed this with the lawyers back then. You were so happy to have the title. You barely read the fine print about my continuing rights." I watched the memory click in her eyes. The day she had boasted to her friends that she owned her childhood home, omitting the crucial detail that her mother held the ultimate right of use. "That's ridiculous. That was just for my security, so you wouldn't be homeless," she cried, clutching her chest dramatically. "And for my security, so you wouldn't throw me out. But the right of habitation, the life estate, it is an asset. It can be sold, Clara. It is a legal, tangible thing. I sold my right of habitation to Mr. Henderson." Clara looked wild-eyed toward the front door. "Henderson? That old fool next door? Why would he buy it? He already has a perfectly good house." He bought it because he has been looking for a place for his niece and her growing family. They are moving soon. They needed immediate occupation. Clara started backing away, shaking her head violently. No, no, you're lying. This is a cruel joke, Mother. Stop it. Go get changed. It's not a joke, and as of 4 p.m., I am no longer the legal occupant here. Mr. Henderson is. She stopped dead. Her face turned from red rage to sickly white. What do you mean you're no longer the occupant? The party is tonight. The guests are arriving. Where is Henderson? I will sue him. I will call my lawyer. He already has a lawyer, dear, a very good one. The sale was complete, and the funds transferred to my new account. I am free of this arrangement. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small formal envelope I had kept ready. This is the written notification of the transfer, signed by both parties and certified by the notary. You should look up the law on life estates, Clara. Just then the doorbell chimed, the polite, restrained sound of a well-dressed official arriving precisely on time. The first guests. Clara looked at the door, then at the envelope in my hand, then back at me. Panic seized her throat. No, no, you absolute monster. You can't ruin my night. You can't destroy everything. Get rid of them. Tell them you're mistaken. You are staying here. I shook my head slowly. I am not staying here. This is no longer my home. The doorbell chimed again, longer this time. Before Clara could move toward the door, another sound stopped her cold. It was the distinct metallic thunk of a log being drilled, followed by the high-pitched whir of a power tool coming from the back entrance. Clara froze, listening to the noise that was muffled but undeniable. "What is that noise?" she hissed, grabbing my arm, her manicured nails digging in. "That is Mr. Henderson," I said, not flinching from her grip. "He chose to exercise his right of immediate occupation. He is changing the locks right now. He needed to secure his new property." Clara gasped, pulling her hand back as if I had burned her. Her eyes widened with disbelief and fury. "He is trespassing. I will call the police. He can't just walk in here." "He is not trespassing, Clara. He is the tenant in possession. The deed is clear. The life estate grants him immediate and full use of the property. The paperwork states that as of 4 p.m., the previous occupant, me, vacated the premises, which I have done, mentally and emotionally, for years." I moved past her, ignoring the frantic ringing of the doorbell. I headed straight for the small ornate front door. "Where are you going, Mother? Don't you dare open that door!" Clara screamed, running to block my path. But she was too late. I reached the handle and pulled the heavy oak door inward. Standing on the immaculate porch were two well-dressed people, the senator's aide and his wife, looking slightly annoyed by the delay. Behind them, standing just slightly off the path, was Mr. Henderson. He wore a respectful but very firm expression. He was flanked by a security guard. Clara stopped dead just a few feet behind me, trapped between the stunned guests and the horrifying reality unfolding inside. "Good evening," I said calmly to the arriving guests. "I apologize for the confusion. We seem to have a temporary issue with the occupancy of the property." Clara pushed forward, trying to regain control. "Don't listen to her. She's confused. Come in, please, come in." Mr. Henderson stepped forward, addressing the guests politely but firmly. "Excuse me, madam," he said, nodding towards Clara. "I am Mr. Henderson. I am the new legal occupant of this residence, effective immediately. My lawyer has confirmed the necessary documents. I am afraid the private event scheduled for tonight must be cancelled. This house is now under immediate renovation and security control." The senator's aide raised an eyebrow, glancing at the frantic, disheveled Clara and the composed elder standing in the doorway. "Renovation? Tonight?" the aide asked, clearly skeptical. "Yes, sir. Unfortunately, there was an undisclosed plumbing emergency that requires immediate shutdown of the premises. I deeply apologize for the inconvenience to your evening, Henderson stated smoothly, presenting a document to the ade's security detail. Clara let out a choked sound, a mixture of rage and utter devastation. No! You snake! You knew! You planned this! You waited until my most important guests were arriving? She screeched at me. I looked at Clara, not with anger, but with profound disappointment that had finally curdled into indifference. Of course, I waited, Clara, I said quietly, addressing only her, but ensuring the guests could hear every word. You needed the house to be clean for your party, and I needed you to understand the true cost of treating your mother like a hired maid. The silence returned, heavier than before. The aide and his wife exchanged horrified glances. I turned back to Mr. Henderson, nodding once. The property is vacant now, Mr. Henderson. Thank you for your consideration. It's my pleasure, Martha, he replied, using my first name for the first time since the contract signing. We have your taxi waiting around the corner. I stepped over the threshold, moving out onto the porch, away from the glittering, sterile interior that had been my prison. I did not look back at Clara. Her sobbing had begun, high-pitched and ugly, echoing slightly down the hallway. I walked past the shocked faces of the first guests and down the manicured stone path. The security guard politely blocked the door, gently shutting out Clara's screams and securing the new owner's peace. When I reached the sidewalk, the evening air was cool and clean. I felt the immense weight of the house lift from my shoulders. The key was still burning a hole in my pocket, but it was no longer the key to that door. It was the key to my freedom. I saw the quiet black car waiting. I reached into my pocket, touching the crisp banknotes and the plastic card. I was walking away from my home of 50 years. But I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I stepped into the taxi, leaving the party lights on inside the dark house, listening only to the click of the door closing behind me. Where would I go now? I had plans, of course, but standing between me and my future was one last essential task. A phone call I had delayed until this precise moment. A message to ensure Clara understood that this was not a temporary setback. It was a final, irreversible decision. I needed to call the lawyer about the will. The laughter grew louder, a grating, brittle sound that echoed off the high ceilings of what had been my home for 40 years. The scent of designer perfume mixed with expensive champagne and the cheap stench of entitlement. I was standing in the shadows of the breakfast nook. I watched Elara. She was glowing under the chandelier light, holding court, sipping her drink, her arm draped around the expensive mahogany mantelpiece. She looked every inch the successful woman she pretended to be. But to me, she just looked like a thief who had stolen the warmth from this place, replacing it with ice and polished marble. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear anymore. It was the release of pressure, the coiled spring finally unwinding. I watched her point across the room, demanding a refill for a guest, then demanding someone move the flowers because they were blocking the view of the new artwork she had hung, without asking me. She was playing the part of the gracious hostess in my house, while I was simply the invisible cleaning staff who hadn't clocked out yet. This was the final image I needed to carry with me, the image of absolute casual disregard. I had finished rinsing the last of the crystal glasses. My part in this theater was over. I slipped out of the kitchen and up the back stairs. No one noticed. No one ever noticed. Upstairs, the small canvas bag I had prepared days ago waited beside my bed. It contained my mother's locket, a few dog-eared photographs, my reading glasses, and the deed of sale copy, signed and sealed just 3 hours earlier. The money, the actual currency that represented my 40 years of labor and sacrifice, was already secure in a separate account. ready for the small cottage I had bought outright near the coast. I picked up the bag. It felt impossibly light, yet heavy with the weight of my future. I walked through the hallways of my memory, the faint etch marks on the doorframe where my children were measured every birthday, the peeling wallpaper in the nursery where I had rocked Elara to sleep so many nights. I placed the house key on Elara's vanity. It was a small ornate silver key I had carried since the day we closed on the house. I had polished it every Christmas. Now it lay cold and abandoned next to her expensive jewelry tray. I walked out the front door and closed it silently behind me. The noise of the party was immediately muffled, distant, and meaningless. The air outside was cold, sharp with the coming winter. Mr. Dale was waiting 3 streets down, his old sedan idling quietly under the yellow street lamp. I slid into the passenger seat. "Is it done, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice low and professional. "It is done, Dale. Every paper signed, every signature verified, the money transferred. The possession clause is active as of midnight tonight. They are still celebrating inside." He just nodded, glancing at his watch. 11:47 p.m. "I have the security team stationed 2 blocks over. The locksmith is with them. They know exactly what to do. You don't have to watch, Eleanor." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug he offered me. It was warm. "I need to watch, Dale. Not for satisfaction, but for certainty. I need to see the lock turn. I need to know it is real." We waited. The time dragged, slow and thick. I thought about the first time I saw Elara wear my wedding dress, altering it without asking. I thought about the words, "Clean this mess." At 12:01 a.m., Mr. Dale made a quick call. He spoke only 4 words: "Execute immediate possession." We watched as a nondescript white van pulled up quickly to the front of my old home. 2 men got out, moving swiftly and efficiently. One carried a toolbox, the other held what looked like a legal notice. The music was still blaring. They were oblivious. I watched as the locksmith began working on the main front door. They were replacing the heavy solid lock mechanism with a new system controlled only by Mr. Dale. It took maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes to erase 40 years of my life. One of the guests, a loud, jovial man, stumbled out onto the front porch to get fresh air. He saw the activity and shouted something rude at the workmen. They didn't even look up. Then the new lock clicked into place, final and ominous. The locksmith gave Mr. Dale's associate the confirmation. Mission accomplished. They drove away as quickly as they came. The party continued for another hour, the guests growing louder and more careless. Around 1:30 a.m., the music finally stopped, replaced by the sound of muffled goodbyes. I saw Elara approach the front door from the inside. She was laughing, probably saying goodbye to the last, most important guest. I watched through the sedan's foggy window as she put her hand on the doorknob. She twisted it, intending to step out and wave them off. The door did not open. She tried again, a little harder. Annoyed, she jiggled the handle, then kicked the base of the door lightly, the way she always did when things didn't work instantly for her. Then the jovial guest came back to help her. They pulled together. The door remained stubbornly, newly locked. I saw Ilara's posture change. The laughter vanished. She was enraged. The guest shouted something through the glass. The locksmith had been efficient. They couldn't even force the old key back in. I saw the glass of the sidelight fog up as Elara pressed her face against it, peering out into the silent night. She must have realized something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. She disappeared from the entryway. A minute later, a light came on in the kitchen. She was undoubtedly checking the back door, the side door, the garage access. All locked. Mr. Dale's phone buzzed quietly. He looked down at the caller ID and sighed. "It's Elara. She's calling your old number. I hadn't changed my number yet. I needed this final communication. Put it on speaker, Dale. Keep driving slowly. He answered the call. Elara's voice, usually dripping with condescension, was now sharp, high-pitched hysteria. Dale, what the hell is going on? The locks are changed. We're trapped inside, Dale. Is this some kind of sick joke? Mr. Dale remained calm. Elara, this is not a joke. This is a lawful execution of a legal contract. My possession of the property, effective 12:01 a.m., is now secured. There was a pause on the line. A terrifying, absolute silence. Possession? What are you talking about? This is my mother's house. You can't. It was your mother's house, Elara. She finalized the sale to me this afternoon. I now own 432 Willow Creek Lane, free and clear, with immediate right of occupancy. I could hear a distant, strangled gasp. She sold it? To you? That old witch? That old manipulative? Where is she? I'm going to kill her. You had no right, Dale. She promised me this house. She had every right, Elara. It was her name on the deed, and her signature on the contract, and I advise you strongly not to use that kind of language toward your mother or anyone else. You have 60 minutes to collect essential personal items and vacate the premises. 60 minutes? Are you insane? Where are we supposed to go? We live here. I leaned closer to the phone. My voice was steady, quiet, and absolutely devoid of any warmth. You haven't lived there in years, Elara. You simply used it as a storage locker, a hotel, and a maid service. The sound of my voice made her stop screaming. The silence returned, this time heavy with recognition. Mother? How could you? After everything I have done for you, after I let you stay here? I closed my eyes, remembering the exhaustion of the last week, the list of demands, the command to clean the mess she had made. You didn't let me stay here, Elara. You forced me to live here and work for you under the shadow of a lie. You treated me like a servant in my own home. You stripped me of my dignity repeatedly. My voice cracked slightly, but I forced it flat again. I paid for this house twice over with my life's work. When I realized that my own child valued me less than the dirt on her shoes, I decided that the house deserved a better owner, someone who actually respects property and ownership. You are a sick, manipulative woman. You ruined my life. You ruined everything. No, Elara, I didn't ruin your life. You ruined my retirement. I simply reclaimed my dignity. The house is now gone. The furniture, the appliances, the renovations you claimed were yours. They are now Dale's property. You are welcome to the clothes on your back and whatever you can carry. The 60 minutes are counting down. I hung up the phone before she could scream again. The sudden silence in the car was profound. Mr. Dale cleared his throat and resumed driving. We were headed to a quiet motel room he had secured for the night. That was cold, Eleanor, he said gently. I looked out the window. The house, dark and locked, receded into the distance. It wasn't cold, Dale. It was necessary. Cold is what she has been giving me for 10 years. We drove in silence for a long time. The weight of the world felt lighter now. I was homeless, but I was free. I had no house, but I had control. I looked down at the small bag containing my mother's locket. It was all I truly needed. The money was in the bank, enough to live simply, peacefully, by the coast. But the fight wasn't over. I knew Elara. The humiliation would fuel a firestorm of legal retaliation and emotional abuse. She would contact her lawyers. She would attempt to invalidate the sale, citing coercion or senility. I was ready for her. The lawyers I had retained were far more competent than hers, specializing in elder law and property disputes. They were waiting for the inevitable phone calls tomorrow morning. I looked forward to the morning, to the first cup of coffee that I didn't have to share with a demanding master, to the silence I didn't have to clean up. The final paperwork I needed to file wasn't about the house. It was about the complete and total severance of my name from hers. That was the next step, the final step toward absolute peace. I placed my hand on the handle of the motel room door. The lock clicked, but this time the click was for me. It was the sound of security. I stepped inside the simple, warm room and closed the door on the wreckage I had left behind. I was finally, irrevocably alone. But alone was safe, and safe was better than servitude.